And I know we've got some new faces around the table as well. So I thought maybe we would just let everybody introduce themselves. And I'm always interested, obviously, you're elected leadership position, but also, I don't know what you do for a living, Bobby.
Okay, Powhatan Planning Commission, side job, along with
Big side job, right?
Yes, and full-time job is a merchant's fixture. We build cabinets for schools, hospital, convenience stores.
Oh, cool. I didn't know.
Casework, all that.
Mr. Spoonhour?
Hey everybody, I'm Neil Spoonhour. Serve on the Goodson County Board of Supervisors, a part-time job. And my wife and I have an advertising agency called PlanRVA for our day job.
Charlie?
I've got the honor of being retired, although I'm working harder and more frequently now than I ever did. Former computer software consultant. Now I'm doing some part-time teaching and occasional substitute teaching, and stay active in a couple of things for the county, as you know, PlanRVA, and occasionally speak before the school board and things of that nature. I'm also on comp plan rewrite team, but I stay busy. And a side note, I've had foot surgery on the accelerator pedal foot, so I try not to drive too much. Check the news. If you see anybody driving into a 7-Eleven, it could be me.
Will that count as our roll call?
I think it
Or do you
will.
need to formally go through everybody else who maybe isn't here?
Oh, Jacob.
I don't think that we need to do a formal roll call, but I will say that we do not have a quorum, which just means basically, I guess we won't take action to approve the minutes. That would be the only action.
Jacob just joined in.
I'm sorry?
Jacob just joined in.
Then we do have a quorum, so we can,
All right.
that gives us that.
Morning, Jacob.
Good morning. Sorry for my tardiness.
No, it's all right. So that gives us a quorum.
Mhm.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and let staff go ahead and introduce you guys? Oh, yeah, Jacob, we were just sort of giving introductions to each member of the committee, including sort of your role here at PlanRVA, but also your day job, what you do.
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Jacob Giovia, and I am honored to be the citizen representative on PlanRVA appointed by the city of Richmond. And in my day job, I am a land use aide for a supervisor in Prince William County.
Awesome. And why don't you introducing staff to everybody as well?
Yeah,
if you don't
great.
mind?
Well, I'll go with probably the stranger in the room first. So I'm very pleased to introduce to everyone Holly Gordon. She is our new, starting on Monday. So she agreed to come in this morning to be with us. So thank you so much for doing that. She will start on Monday as our new community engagement manager. So we're glad to have you. And I think on the agenda, we'll have you give a little bit more background about yourself.
Good.
But you guys know Sid, so we'll go around
Please.
this way.
My name is Sid Kumar. I'm the digital media specialist here. I manage and run our social media accounts, work with Gilbert in a lot of our graphic design and content creation, and help set up and organize and coordinate our multimedia setup for the boardroom and AV tests and stuff. So.
I'm Gilbert Gogel, and I'm the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator at PlanRVA.
I'm Phil Regan. I'm a transportation planner at PlanRVA, and I used to be a journalist. So I kind of, and I've worked with Holly over the years. So yeah, a lot of experience with media and communications.
I'm sorry, I'm Janice Firestone. I'm the program manager, and I organize the meetings and minutes and make sure everybody's inbox is filled with emails and meeting invitations.
I thought we would do that because obviously, as Chairman Davis would have thought, it was a little bit more of a structured component now to all the committees. Obviously, as the other members do start filling in, make sure that we sort of all know sort of who everybody is and get to know each other, I think is one of the cool things about volunteering. And so I'm hoping we get a chance to do that going forward. Jacob, Charlie, we're just taking a straw poll on whether or not this committee needs to actually formally have reasons for participating remotely instead of in person. And unless you overrule me, our preference was, we don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Okay?
I defer to the chair.
Okay, cool. Next would be meeting minutes. If everybody had a chance to sort of review those. Again, trying to make sure we stick with protocol. Once you're ready, if we could get somebody to make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 23rd meeting.
Sure, I approve that we approve the amendments as, I move that we approve the amendments as presented, meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, none opposed. So now I get to
Yeah.
hand things back to you.
Yeah, so we kicked off our recruitment process earlier this summer. Just to recap you, Rashonda Lanier Jackson was our previous community engagement manager. She took a new position with Corporation for Supportive Housing earlier this summer, and we're excited to see how she's going to be getting back into the housing space. She had come to us from Department of Housing and Community Development, and I think is excited to be able to pursue her passion in affordable housing. So she set Holly on a really, I think, good path, and with Gilbert joining Rashonda's team earlier this year, we've got a good kind of trajectory and a good momentum with this committee. So we're really excited that Holly was interested in joining the team. She came very highly referred to us, and just a couple of people that I've been able to share with our partners and that kind of thing that Holly's taken the position. It's been really cool to see their faces light up on the screen when they heard that you are who took the job. So I'd love for you to be able to just share a little bit about who you are and your background, and then you'll get a little bit of a feel for the committee as well.
Great. Hi, that was very nice, thank you. I came to Richmond for college and stayed, so I went to U of R and have stayed since, as I feel like I spent 4 years learning the community and trying to figure out what are all the organizations that are here, because my goal was to work in the nonprofit sector, which is where I've spent most of my career. So I've worked primarily in a lot of convening type roles. So I worked for Hands On Greater Richmond, I worked for the Collaboratory of Virginia, doing nonprofit capacity building, volunteer management. So my heart lives in the nonprofit world, but I've done a little bit of everything, as many people who work in nonprofits do. I've had a communications hat, I've had program management hat, I've had operations and tech hats. So I like to do a lot of different things. During the pandemic, I also picked up work with a small bike tourism business called Basket and Bike. And so I've been doing history and nature tours on the Capitol Trail and downtown and in Jamestown, and helping run the operations for that small business, which has been wonderful. And so I will probably keep doing that in addition to this, but maybe a little less frequent, because I'm a huge bike nerd. I love bike and transit, and really enjoyed coming to the PlanRVA Day that was in June. That really kind of reinvigorated my love and my nerdiness for planning and transportation, and realized that, hey, I could do all of those things that I was good at in this kind of environment. And so I was really eager to see a job that had so many of the parts of my brain and my work experience in one place. And so I'm excited to be able to kind of connect the regional planning and the transportation and the biking to the public in a way that maybe hasn't been done before.
Thank you.
Any initial questions, comments? Welcome, Holly.
Welcome, Holly. I'm impressed with your background, resume, and your energy level. And a side comment, I'm now a nonprofit.
You personally, yeah, it's great. All right, where's your 990?
My accountant, Billy Soul Write-Off, is drafting it now.
All right, great.
Continue on the work plan.
Yeah, so at the risk of putting Mr. Spoonhour and Mr. Davey a little bit on the spot, I kind of wanted to be able to anchor this morning's updates in some history, just because we've got, new committee member and new staff member. And so the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee is in some regards not a misnomer, I don't think, but we've spent a lot of time since its formation after the strategic planning effort was completed in 2019. Mr. Davey chaired that committee, and so one of the next steps out of that process was to form this committee. So that it is a relatively new committee, and then when Mr. Spoonhour was the chair, on the heels of adoption of that strategic planning framework, we spent a lot of time talking about who's our audience and what are we trying to say, and so that's been a theme of this committee. And so I think one of the things that we've identified and have attempted to continue to work through, both at the level of staff efforts, but also to keep it rich in the conversation here, is that the 9 jurisdictions really are, when you think about maybe like a set of concentric rings of audience, the 9 jurisdictions through our commissioners really are that primary audience. So that being said, we have also heard loud and clear from the elected officials that sit on the commission board that getting the word out more broadly about who we are and what we do, I dare say evangelizing a bit about regional cooperation and the collective efforts of the jurisdictions to be able to make this region a good place to work, live, and play is another piece of the communications puzzle. And then, of course, as you all know, we manage public planning processes that have public engagement components to it. And so I think as I think about this, it's not necessarily a prioritization of those 3 efforts, if you will, but it's really kind of working to push all of those forward at the same time, but have them be working in integration with each other so that as commissioners, our commissioners are better equipped to go back to their home community and talk with their colleagues on their board or their planning commission or with the different interactions that everyone has in their daytime life, to be able to talk about what's going on and through whatever communication means each of you as commissioners pursue on the daily basis, you feel like you can spread the word, but also to make sure that we're doing what we need to do on kind of creating that content. So it's kind of a big job. And we received an award from the Community Foundation now almost 3 years ago to help us think through how we manage that. And so we have a community engagement strategy that has outlined kind of a distinction of audiences and what the different tactics would be to reach those various audiences and how we would think about customizing the messaging to get the action that we want on the other side of each of those audiences. So that community engagement strategy was adopted by this committee. It's been the framework that we've used, and then it was the basis really to come to the commission 2 years ago to create the community engagement manager position. It was really, I think, a justification of establishing that role here at the commission, and it has served as the basis for forming really the team that you see and how we function. So we have staff members that have different roles and sit in different supervisory structures within the agency, but really I think we've been trying to grow a much more agency-wide emphasis on improved communication to commissioners, improved communication with our localities, and then of course improved communication with the stakeholder groups, I should say, and then the public at large. So I wanted to be able to kind of set that context because it's a lot all at the same time. And I wanted to just take a pause to see if either of you had additions or corrections to what I said, because it's kind of fundamental to.
And then I might ask each of us too, starting with you, Mr. Struenhauer, also share maybe how we're doing back in Goochland, on that side, based on your experience. Obviously, so sometimes the choir all get it when you're sitting in church, but then you go back in your communities and you can either see that we're being effective or ineffective. So anything that you might want to add to what Martha said, but also I'd be interested in your perspective. How are we doing over the last 24 months?
Sure, I appreciate that. So it was a kind of a unique introduction to PlanRVA. From my history, I came to 4 meetings and I was asked to be chair. I wasn't really even sure what we were doing at that point. I was like, no, I just go in and say aye a few times a meeting, so it'll be fine, and then I'll help it loose. But
Wow.
And but I really was able to dive in quickly. I like to speak in pictures, and I'm a visual person. I think there's an organization in Goochland called Goochland Cares, which was 2 nonprofits that came together, Goochland Free Clinic and Goochland Family Services, and it's one of the few mergers that actually worked and worked well. When I was on their board and we were looking to do they had programs and they were all over the place. Like the clothes closet was here, the dental was here, medical was over some other place, a mile down the road. When we were looking to build a building, when we did the study, what we found was very similar to PlanRVA. We had a lot of programs, but people only knew us through the program they interacted with us. So if you said Goochland, first off, the name was terrible. It's Goochland Free Clinic and Family Services, which does not roll off the tongue. So if you said, oh, well, yeah, I know them. That's the food bank. Well, no, it's not just the food bank. So we had to really figure out how to rebrand ourselves as the community safety net is what we wound up with. So I feel like that's sort of the challenge that we've had. We've had, I'm still constantly running into people. Just this week, actually, I had a conversation like, well, have you ever thought about calling PlanRVA for that? And they're like, nope, never even crossed my mind. So I think I'm excited about where we are and the plans. I do think we have work to do to get a more concise way to communicate our services and our service offerings, so that we should be the first people when we have anything planning or anything almost to do with land use that we're thinking about. Like, I personally, I think our goal should be aspirational, that PlanRVA is the first person you call. And that's a hard thing to do. That's a tough lift. So, but I feel like we've made a lot of improvements moving forward under your leadership, Mr. Day.
I like what you said, because to me, that target is maybe never attainable, but aiming for that target is, so if our actions are all governed by aiming for that target, then we're sort of doing our job. So.
And selfishly speaking, obviously, when you think of planning, and even if you think of how planners are educated, it's typically all urban focused. I've been very pleased at the level of work that, Martha, you've done on trying to get more of a rural focus. Like, how do we plan for rural? You don't think it needs to happen, but the pressure that I'm under right now to figure out how to grow to redo our subdivision ordinances, because, oh great, I'm connecting everybody to high speed, to broadband. Well, great, now everybody can work from home. So now the barrier of living 35 miles away has been reduced to, an internet access. So we're under extreme pressure that I think that just opens up a whole new, and Martha and I have had conversations where, what if PlanRVA was the rural, like we built that skill, so people around the Commonwealth and other localities were saying, hey, if we needed to plan for rural, PlanRVA's, they figured that out.
Thanks for sharing that. Good perspective. Bobby, any perspective of how PlanRVA is doing in the county?
Mike and I have talked very much about it. I think our partner to the north, Goochland, neighbor is using PlanRVA much better than Powhatan is. I think we could do better by trying to engage and use PlanRVA more in our planning and stuff. We're face a lot of the same issues that Goochland's has, but with PlanRVA, especially with the rural communities, I think could be a very big plus, and we need to take more advantage and get more of that word out to some of the smaller counties that, hey, this service is here, it's available, take advantage of it.
Jacob, any observations or perspectives you want to share?
I think that Neil has an issue that would be great for PlanRVA. I think that would be perfect. And I think that exemplifies, some of the stuff that PlanRVA has been working on from our perspective in Richmond. I think I'm really glad in hindsight that we focused our attention, our budgeting, and our strategy on sort of member orientation and member education. So when I came on, we had a lot of 20+ year, both elected officials and constituent or community appointed members. And since then, there's been a lot of turnover at the state level. They're having the most turnover in 160 years. In the local level, both in terms of leadership changes and in terms of elections, there's a lot of new orientation and a lot of newness. I think it's a great job. And PlanRVA has done a great job of educating the folks who have been around for a few years on what PlanRVA can do and what tools PlanRVA has. But the newness of the changing of the guard is just a constant, and it's going to be a constant. And that's why I think, in hindsight, I'm glad that we allocated the way we did, because I think it's going to be, important going forward.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, no more than 2 observations, Charlie. At this point in the agenda.
My question second photo, well, to address from the trenches the benefit, I've greatly benefited from the presentations of the full commission meeting. And some years ago, I sat and listened to one of Chet's presentations before the Hanover board. Very informative. One thought, maybe have Chet or somebody meet with and have a presentation with some of the community service boards, the CSB in particular at Hanover, as to PlanRVA's participants, players, what's the term I'm looking for? Because maybe some of those boards, service boards, and volunteer boards might benefit by knowing that you're there and the additional resources. But I find this very informative, the full commission.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'll just share a couple of things because I'm not an elected official, so I respect the fact that PlanRVA is governed by and convenes all the elected officials. So 2 points I want to make. One, as far as the leadership of this committee, if we do believe that more of an elected or appointed person is a better chair for this committee, those kind of things are on the table as far as I'm concerned. And part of why I share that is the observation of how things have sort of gone from the strategic plan. I think the first committee actually was basically tasked with being the community engagement team. But as board members, our job is to be advisory and to empower the staff that is already assembled now. You've assembled the team to do it. So I sometimes have a hard time doing that, where you sort of don't roll up your sleeves and do the work yourself, but you're supposed to be the one who's supposed to both empower the team to act outreach-wise, which is an important part of it. But I'll also remind us, amongst our colleagues on the rest of PlanRVA, our job is also to provide the in-reach to make sure the rest of the board understands what this hardworking staff is doing as well. And I think we've started gelling, and I think that's under Chairman Davis' leadership. I think that's what he really wants this committee to be established for, is to make sure that staff has the legs and the resources and the funding and the support of the full board to do everything that you need to do. So I share that. So like I said, when we look at the agenda and it's your job to present 95% of what's going on, I'm saying, like, well, that's correct. It's supposed to be that way. You know, the board members are supposed to be advisory and then a resource for you guys as you need us. So but I think that we've got some great traction, and Holly, you coming on board is hopefully this sort of background makes sense to you, but hopefully it makes sense to the point where you feel like you already are empowered on Monday when you get here, I hope. So, turn it back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying to soak in everything that I've heard because I wanted today to be kind of more discussion oriented and
Can I add a final one? Just
please, yeah.
Of course.
So we're experiencing something new to Goochland, and it may be similar to Powhatan. I think New Kent is going through it as well. And Tim, you're gonna smile because when you hear where I'm going, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, you definitely have an issue. You know, we are an emerging county, right? Like, we've been Goochland for 250 almost years, and but now we're starting to hit our legs, and we are in a place where our needs are outpacing our ability to staff. So organizations like PlanRVA, like the Timmons Group, are working with consultants is not something we've ever done. And in my professional career, I have found that it is much more difficult to be a good customer of work than a good performer of work. A good customer, you have to, it's like, I understand where I'm going, but you have to be able to articulate your conditions of satisfaction. Yeah, there's different muscles you have to be able to develop. How amazing would it be if an organization like a safe organization like PlanRVA, which I would call safe because we work on a fee schedule, but it's reasonable, and if they could help these localities that have to build the skill set be good customers of work by how we engage with them. So not just how we engage to, hey, come to us because we can help you, but we can help you build the skill set so that when we engage with a Timmons Group and who knows how to do it, excellent, that's all they do, our staffs are able to build that skill set that is, I think, really difficult but super necessary, as I'm sure Tim's his group have been working on several projects now, and think it's evident that we kind of need to build that skill amongst our staffs.
I was hoping you might feel comfortable sharing it, because I think it's a perfect example and almost white paper or collaborative conversation that we ought to be having.
Yeah.
And it sort of reminds me back at the strategic plan, focusing on the customer is a question you always need to continue to ask, and I do it at our firm all the time. And then we sort of identified that in the PlanRVA footprint, we sort of had 3 or 3.5 customers that had full-time experienced staff, you know, and 4.5 customers who didn't.
Yeah.
And so there even needs to be maybe an extra focus on the 4.5 or so that really can't staff up yet or has turnover or whatever the reason is. And we really tried to focus on those would be the customers that the services could be sort of built for. And the larger jurisdictions that had staffs of 40 people in their planning department might be somebody that we're more of a collaborator with. So I do think with the economic development pressures in our region starting to hit the perimeter, I think that's a great possible wheelhouse for PlanRVA to sort of step up and be cognizant of and possibly available to help with. So I was hoping you might be comfortable to share that. You and I didn't talk beforehand, but it's a great beta test, I think, for where PlanRVA might fit in.
Great.
So I'm kind of torn because I really want to dive into that, but I also have these agenda items that I wanted to cover. So I'm going to say, thinking about sort of the history of the last 3 or 4 years, and if I were to name kind of a focus, like a really huge thrust that the board has been engaged, particularly with me on, and that has been maybe a measure of success, as you all know, first it was getting our financial house in order and really making sure that we turned the tide with how our operating budget and our operating expenses, mesh together. And so, as you know, we spent a lot of time, as anybody who's been around for the last 5 or more years, we've spent a lot of time really honing that. And not to say that the gas has been let up on that at all, but as we've gotten that to speed, I think then we've been able to shift our focus. And so you all know that then we really did shift the focus around this kind of community and public engagement initiative with the plan and the strategy and the approval for the investment in that position. At the same time, we were approved to be able to invest with our general fund dollars in building capacity around data research and analysis. So we've simultaneous to building this team, have been able to build another team in the organization that's focused on effective data collection and management, and then data services. And so that has been kind of another emerging service area. This past spring, the executive committee spent most of the spring, and I think reporting back to the full commission, that the big thrust for this year is really around kind of how to dig back into member services, really being able to focus on what this local technical assistance. It emerged last fall in discussion with Goochland County team about how to take advantage of the infrastructure bill funding, and how to really think about our region being a beneficiary of this unprecedented federal investment, and what role does PlanRVA play in tracking grant opportunities and that kind of thing. But those conversations just got deeper and deeper and deeper, and I think what you're naming today is another component of that, and I think is really exciting. So not quite ready to talk about it fully, but what you guys have done for me today is illuminate in my conversations with the executive committee in September about how we align our staff to be able to really deal with this identified focus area. And I'm also seeing that perhaps a piece of this could actually be nested under this committee as well, so that we could have an advisory group in addition to the executive committee to really be able to build this out the way that I'm hearing it being defined.
Your perspective, yeah, but how do you both be a client and serve a client? I think is a great conversation, because in the private sector, you sort of learn the hard way. And sometimes.
I would say you learn the harder way.
Well, that's true, yeah. But you also have built a team of consultants that not only does PlanRVA have access to, all of the PlanRVA 9 customers have access to as well. And in my opinion, we haven't talked about that bench strength at any meeting that I've been in recently. But you've got all those consultants that are pre-qualified, that have helped us with our branding, but also could help each of the jurisdictions with their challenges as well. So.
And I think on the planning services side, we've had a lot of conversations with the smaller jurisdictions about creating that same on-call bench model for planning and engineering and, those types of services as well. So that when the need exceeds the capacity of our staff, there's another option to be able to purchase cooperatively on some of those things, whether it's, a preliminary engineering report, whether it's, 30% design, those kinds of things, the non-professional side of the planning and engineering services that we can cooperatively procure. And so how could we, create that mechanism for quick task orders, to keep that work moving.
I like us being competitors.
On the planning services.
I don't think we're talking about being competitors,
I'm
so,
just kidding.
yeah.
But it was a good conversation during the strategic plan,
Right.
to some degree, considering PlanRVA service provider was sort of where I got my perspective.
Right.
And tried to educate some of the members of the strategic planning committee who really never thought about PlanRVA as a consultant before. But when we started having that conversation, then what I do for a living and what you do for a living, we can sort of see where they just complement each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jacob, let me go to Jacob first. I see it, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the planning services, I'm interested in maybe drawing out the distinction of what the need is in the rural jurisdictions, not because I don't think that they're, we more staff. Richmond, for example, uses consultants all the time, but if we added a layer with PlanRVA and our bench consultants, that might make it more confusing. So if we could just maybe make that distinction of what actual hurdle we're clearing, is it technical, is it additional capacity, is it some combination of the two? That would be, I think, helpful, because I think Richmond would be, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they're interested in something, but they obviously don't want to add more, complication if they're already moving very quickly.
One thing I'll say is, the nice part about our organization is we're voluntary. So, nothing that we would do would obligate any of the 9 jurisdictions to participate. So if a locality already was comfortable with their system for procurement and their system for accessing, those types of services, this would not, in my mind, be structured to compete or infringe upon that in any way.
I like that distinction. Oh, sorry.
I think one of the things that we've heard from some of the smaller jurisdictions is that, Jacob, it's basic stuff like when there's staff turnover, we need somebody to help with plan review. And is that something that PlanRVA can and could be doing, or is that something that we could broker, a relationship with an on-call firm that could do that on that contractual interim basis? There's different degree and magnitude of work that happens depending on the scale of projects that are coming to some of these jurisdictions that require some specialization that aren't necessary all the time. And so, is there an opportunity to think about us providing support for floodplain management or, other types of kind of functional things that need to happen in the planning and zoning space? I think in addition to that, there's more of a discussion around accessing federal funds and kind of how to think about positioning localities to have those things in place to be able to be competitive. And a lot of times it's just the lift is too heavy when the NOFO comes out from a federal funding opportunity and you see what you have to do, and our smaller jurisdictions just are not as well equipped to be able to turn those types of opportunity responses around like the larger jurisdictions are. Those are a couple of examples of things that I've heard. On the flip side, the other thing that I've heard is if, interestingly, Mr. McGraw mentioned this in an executive committee meeting this spring, and it was an open session, so you can go back and listen to the tape to verify, but he talked about, it would be really interesting if our staff, who is pretty stable, could focus on these like bigger projects that the town council and the planning commission want to see happen, and PlanRVA could kind of sit in the background to help keep the operations going. So I think sometimes staff think of us as like, there's got to be this big flashy project that has to come to PlanRVA, and it's not always thought about how we could play a role in sort of more of the
kind of support to the day-to-day functions. And I was intrigued by his comment on that about those on staff who know the community the best and know kind of what the intentions of the special initiatives could focus their energy there, and we could come in and kind of backfill so that resources are allocated in a, like a gear up and gear down way. And I found that to be a really interesting concept, and, just a little bit of a shift in paradigm and how we've talked about this over time.
No, that's helpful. And I think the distinction between a good customer or a good consumer and a good producer is really helpful for me, because even the things you mentioned, some of those things in terms of adding capacity, a big project, even though Richmond has more numerical staff, they're still new to Richmond and Richmond staff. But I think the actual distinction that is helpful is PlanRVA being able to have help the rural jurisdictions, as my understanding, of being what are you actually asking for and what's the expertise you're lacking, and here's how we can procure that for you. And that's a little bit different.
Charlie, you had your hand up
Yeah.
the old-fashioned way.
Thanks, Mr. Davey. I've got a question as to Martha as to what the advisory groups would be made of and their expertise. But I want to agree with Jacob that, I can see the benefits to I can assume the benefits to some of the smaller jurisdictions with some of your greater technical expertise on possibly transportation, funding, federal, that sort of thing. We might be, in Hanover, we might be strong on the transportation side of things from my interactions with Joe Vadunas. But I assume from the housing perspective, affordable housing and things of that similar ilk with some of the community service boards, a generic term here, that y'all's expertise and knowledge and your consultants would be able to strengthen their value to our community. Or summing up, one size fits all doesn't work, but y'all's specific expertise in areas where different jurisdictions, small or large, are lacking, that's the benefit individually, if that makes any sense. Thanks. But I'll get back to Martha. The advisory groups you mentioned, more information on that, please.
Advisory groups,
You're just kind of brainstorming the subcommittee, potentially from this for the.
I just was thinking, insofar as the charter for this committee is focused on engagement of commissioners and engagement with local governments, I think that this idea of how to effectively communicate about what the services are that our small and large that all of our jurisdictions are in need of from us, this could be kind of functionally something that we talk about more here than we traditionally have. Yeah. We've focused a lot the last year and a half on communication and media channels and
Awareness,
kind of media products. And I think what you guys are raising today is another dimension of locality and commission member engagement that could be a part of the conversations that this committee has.
Yeah, I mean, I do think when it came out, it almost sort of felt like, it was the Publicity Advertisement Committee when it was sort of coming out of the strategic plan and just literally starting at elementary level. We're now seniors in high school, I think. It's not elementary anymore, but that constant drumbeat is important. Like we talked about at the last, full committee meeting, getting content to actually share. So some people think it's got to be a headline news, otherwise it's not worthy of sort of taking the time to get the content out there. But great awareness people hit a constant drumbeat every day. Our marketing team beats the crap out of all of us to make sure that we submit even something minor to help Timmons Group go ahead and get it out there, because it's just an awareness thing and a branding thing. So we're to the point now where I think we've got the infrastructure in place to do it, but if there's no content, then the infrastructure starts rusting a little bit. So even small things that are going on in the localities, I think one of the things we need to really get a lot of our colleagues to do is try to prioritize that, or have them delegate it to somebody to prioritize it, so we can make sure the word is sort of getting out about stuff.
So I wanted to take through a couple of the kind of updates about things that we're working on and things that are coming
And
forward.
this conversation, I agree, is
I think it can-
extremely
yeah.
healthy, and maybe we ought to make sure that we have something like this on the agenda, so we can always sort of check in with the mission,
Yeah.
and check in and see how we're doing, and especially as we get the full committee up and running. I really do like the camaraderie part of, these meetings. It'd be great if people look forward to the committee meetings instead of dreading the community meeting, so anything we can do to keep improving that, I'm all ears, so.
And Janet, so I'm thinking as we think about the agenda for the next meeting, we can work with Mr. Davy on this, but maybe adding a standing part of the agenda that talks specifically about what we've been doing in the localities for the last, period of time. I think that could be a really good, jumping off point.
And I know Neil's already thinking about this, but, Charlie and Javi taking that message back to in between committee meetings saying, or asking, why isn't PlanRVA doing that? If it's something, obviously, all the jurisdictions I recognize are dealing with staff turnover, so as a consultant, it is a nice position for our firm to be in because we've been around so long. We often are looked at to sort of support staff when even simple things as plan review, we do a lot of that same kind of stuff. But with the turnover in staff, there may be some consistency too that PlanRVA can sort of bring. A lot of the people that move around, they move around inside the region. And it's fascinating to me how much you learn by people moving around inside the region, good, bad, and ugly. It's really sort of cool to witness it, but it's a very collegial group of people in all 9 jurisdictions. One of the things I'm most proud of is, I was telling somebody, how do you find the time to serve on boards like this? And at my firm, I tell everybody, this is my day job. My day job is to be out with the 9 jurisdictions that we're lucky enough to serve. And even though I'm not necessarily the professional service provider that is being hired by the jurisdictions, to some degree, it is my responsibility on behalf of my firm to make sure that jurisdictions, both at the elected level and the staff level, know who Timmons Group is and what do we do for a living and all that kind of stuff, so. Go ahead, why don't you take us through?
Well, I think I'll preference, and I will try to be as brief so that if you have questions, we can spend time there, but I'll try to preface the 3 updates that I have with, I think most of the staff know that I don't like to do things that are singular in purpose. So sometimes that is a little bit probably confusing because it seems like we're trying to accomplish a lot of things with one, and Tim knows that as well. We've been embarking on kind of participating a little bit more in, as you know, from PlanRVA Day, but then also trying to connect more into on-the-ground community events. And so A, B, and C are kind of listed in chronological order, and I just wanted to brief you on a couple of things. We had a staff group get together in the last couple of weeks to talk about a debrief from PlanRVA Day, and I have to say I've just been astounded by the feedback that we've gotten. I really and Holly choosing to apply for the job because she came to this event is just really, remarkable to me and in the best possible way. I think everybody, all of the staff members in the room have already heard me say this, but I really thought of that as like a singular open house event. I didn't think that it was going to be something that we would be doing annually, and it sounds like now we are. So, so the planning has begun for that, and we're talking about that. I think that it's the staff perspective that we want to keep it scheduled with the joint annual meeting. There was a lot of synergy there, and so we're thinking about creatively how we can learn from what we experienced this past June and be able to take that forward. But I wanted to foreshadow that this is going to be a topic to come back to this committee as we kind of frame out. We've got Gilbert and Sid have taken lead on sort of generating ideas of content and subject matter that we could focus on for the day, and so we're going to be bringing that information back in the form of, I think, more of a structured sort of recommendation for how we approach that. As you all know, that event was more of a staff-driven event this past year, but we think that that's an opportunity to get you all involved in that and thinking through the flow of the day and how we handle the reality that the room was already at capacity this year. So what's the opportunity for growth, I guess, is kind of the question on my mind. So with that, we've also been thinking, and Janice has really been driving this idea of getting much more kind of calendared on when our special events are. So we're already in communication with the Chamber about hosting the 2024 Regional Transportation Forum. So as you know, the TPO has historically hosted that event, and so we had a lot of success last year at Main Street Station with that event. Did have a much more, I think, diverse and kind of different set of folks in the room, which is what we were hoping for by partnering with PlanRVA on that event, and hope to be able to grow that. That will be an event that's off-site, and so we're in conversations with them about location
how to structure that. And those conversations obviously will be weighed in heavily by Mr. Winslow and the TPO Executive Committee and any committee that they form to be able to help move that event forward. And then we're participating as a sponsor again this year in the Richmond Kickers games and the Squirrels. And so it is an opportunity for us to table, and be able to interact with the community and say hello, but it's also an opportunity for us to create some opportunities outside of the boardroom for board members and our community partners and stakeholders to get together at, these community sports events. And so I think we have a couple of games coming up where the Squirrels and the Kickers are having more of like the community nights, which are our chances to have larger volumes of tickets to be able to give. So I think there's communication that's coming out about those types of opportunities. And so again, it's just more of a kind of a thank you to our folks that sit around this table on Thursday mornings or Friday mornings, but also to be able to just let people have a more of an informal way to connect and be together. And then I'll just say one more thing on this, still in the works, and I think by the September commission meeting, we'll have details to share, but Mr. Spoonhour knows, I mean, the reality of our local government's general elections this fall, really, and I don't know if you wanna, I think just a statement of fact that you shared, regardless of the outcome of the election, the Goochland County Board of Supervisors composition is drastically changing by who's not running.
Yeah, we have an interim person now that is serving District 4, but all other districts are, the incumbents aren't running. So I'll be the most, except for a county attorney, I've only been doing this 3.5 years. I'll be the most tenured person in Goochland manager and above.
Okay. And that reality is maybe a little bit more drastic in Goochland, but it's not, so I think we're paying attention to that closely. And to segue into item B, I think thinking a lot about how this committee and what role this committee can play in engaging with not just the people who get appointed to this board after the January organizational meetings, but how do we start to communicate to a board of supervisors who potentially doesn't have anybody on their board that really has familiarity with us. And so that's a new reality. We've long time enjoyed a nice kind of, I would say, a softer turnover in the jurisdictions as far as who's serving on the local government boards, but the transition in Charles City County is the same way. We're losing by virtue of the decisions that incumbents are making not to run again. We're losing folks that we've relied upon to be kind of the leaders in the region. And so it's a big topic of conversation. So we've been thinking a lot about how to build our internal infrastructure around communications with board members. So Janice has been doing a lot of work this summer, and I think we'll be debuting some new kind of tools. They might not be that big of a deal to you guys, but internally it's going to really help us with our organization of our databases and how we can manage communications. We know that things like the calendar invites are difficult on the receiver end side, and sometimes the crazy things that happen. And so we're working to be able to improve that kind of experience that you all have with us, and especially those of you that serve on multiple boards and committees and things like that. We know that it's magnified the more touch points we have with you. But this orientation and onboarding process and really kind of gearing up for that. So we have been thinking about, and I think at the last meeting we talked about this a little bit, but I've put together an outline. I would love to spend a lot of time at our next meeting really talking about this. But the concept is that perhaps the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee could become the host of our onboarding and orientation to new commissioners next winter, and then continue that. And so I've been looking a lot and doing some research among colleagues across the country, but also kind of looking at nonprofit board development, board management best practices. And so we're thinking of it, structuring it a little bit differently than say maybe a coffee at, the person's local coffee spot at their convenience, where we sort of talk through some things, but building a structure where it's less about me sitting there talking about bylaws and voting structure and allocation of votes and the charter and things like that, but really about you all engaging with your colleagues about what the benefit of participating in a board like this is, and really sort of from the jump sharing kind of why you do what you do and where what you're doing is value added because of this organization.
Martha, you know, it's interesting you say it because about a month and a half ago, there's 3 of us that are running unopposed. So I've already been sending them links to these meetings because come January 1, the chair of each of our organizations is going to have to appoint people to these boards. So trying to get people involved. It just kind of struck me as we're sitting here, has PlanRVA ever thought about having a candidates event? Like, you know, 'cause I know like HBAR, RAR do it, but they're doing it to figure out who they're going to support. I think it would be a huge differentiator for candidates to come and, you know, hear a presentation about PlanRVA before they even get elected, so that they know, hey, this is what's going on in the region. Because a lot of times, if people don't get elected, they'll still jump on other boards and different things to get involved for the next time around. But this is something that you may want to consider, or even just, you know, sending literature out to the candidates just to know that, hey, this is part of what your job's going to be. Because I had no idea.
I'd be very open to talking with you about that. I probably, just to be totally honest, have some trepidation about how to make sure that we're not finding ourselves in a situation where we're getting involved in the political process.
Sure.
So, but would certainly be open to talking more about how to equip people, you know, with information and access to information, because I do think that that's an important part of the process.
Yeah, because Powhatan is on kind of the same predicament, this, and maybe even more so. We have 2 members that are not running at all, and all 5 of them are going to be heated election in all 5 districts. So we could have a tremendous amount of turnover, which of course also affects all of the planning commissioners since we were appointed by them.
Right.
So as far as PlanRVA, how to get that information out to new members, supervisors, and planning commissioners, which could be a very crucial, critical piece of information for those new members to have. So I don't know. Yes, I'll do everything I can, and so will the board that's on there now before the turnover to say, hey,
Right.
you can depend on, here's somebody you can depend on, here you can call on these people. Now, whether or not they follow up, that's going to be the thing.
I will say that we're planning an intentional outreach over the next couple of months to introduce ourselves and to introduce this notion of, you know, a regional planning body. And so again, more to come on it. Once I have some more details, I'll be able to share. But I want you all to know that we're actively thinking about that, and I think it's going to be yet another conversation for our next meeting.
2 really good examples though of you're creating the package, so to speak, you know, as you're sort of reaching out to some of the candidates, you know, and you're maybe wishing you had a package that you could sort of hit me to some degree, that feedback to this committee to go ahead and go to staff of forming that package, because everybody receives communications differently. And sometimes you send a link and nobody opens the link kind of thing. It might need to be that it's a 1-pager. That might be a little bit more effective than sending a link, because nobody gets into the link, and that might be a good feedback we can put on. Charlie?
Thank you. Your comment to Neil, running unopposed, I envy that situation. After the elections, in some jurisdictions, they will have a orientation for the newly elected, which involves all of the council or all of the supervisors together in an open meeting with the public, but each of the department heads will give an overall presentation of what their department does. I would suggest that PlanRVA ask to be invited to be a presenter, 5-7 minutes of what your services are, what your emphasis are, what your expertise, supplemental to some of the bigger, complementary to, supplementary to some of the smaller, complementary to some of the bigger ones. But that will occur after the elections in most jurisdictions, sometimes in the January timeframe. And it's often in lieu of the first real supervisor meeting. So I would suggest reaching out before to try to get on that agenda for new supervisor orientation.
I will do that.
Jacob, is your hand still up or is that just a digital remnant?
Nope, it is still up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It reminded me of something, and then my point, which is that new planning commissioners also typically have training and are typically the person whom the elected officials sort of for their planning items. And I wonder if we can slip them a one-pager in their presentations locally, or have, 15, 30 minutes to present. They get there, typically like half day or full day long intro to the planning commission. So that's one idea. And then secondarily, I really just feedback, Martha, on your idea of the sort of using the committee as a more comprehensive touch points. I really like that, because I think if you're newly elected, having worked for multiple newly elected folks, you sort of get a lot of stuff right at the beginning. And if it's not immediately relevant to you, you sort of circle back in 4 months. And so that's just the nature of the beast. So I think bringing the touch points and the support system makes it relevant for the new folks.
Thank you for that. That's a really helpful reminder to me. Thank you.
And then one observation I'll just share, not suggesting we go as far as the training for economic development, EDA and IDA members is concerned, but Virginia Tech does have an orientation that is directly aimed at EDA and IDA new members.
They
And
do.
almost everybody that goes to that comes back and says, holy crap, I didn't understand economic development, and sort of now I do. And so I know we actually donate time to teach at that program, and they do it around the state. And again, I'm not advocating for a 1.5-day session, but there is sort of an awareness that EDA and IDA members get by getting immersed in that. And a lot of times they'll just bring in guest speakers to talk about finance, legal, engineering, marketing, all that kind of stuff. So it might be another template we just sort of contrast.
So Virginia Tech also does local land use education program, and it's a planning commissioner's certification program. And a lot of jurisdictions around the Commonwealth require new commissioners to go to that.
Okay.
Some make it voluntary, and some of them don't have the resources to send people, so it's a little bit harder. But we have over the years been in contact with the managers of that education program. It was Mike Chandler for a long time, and then now it's Jonah Phil. I'm blanking on his last name, but anyway, that's an opportunity, I think, especially through our state association. And I will also note that we've actually been invited through VACO and VML to participate in the statewide local elected official trainings. And so that's through our state association, but because sometimes they happen in Richmond, my counterpart from Crater and I often get tapped to be on the regional commission, session. So we just did that this summer for the new elected officials training for VML. And typically they won't ask me to do it again for a while. I don't mean that like the way that it sounded. I just mean David, our state association director, tends to try to share the load around. But I will find out when the VACO one is, and I think that that's another opportunity to touch base there. I know Mr. Weddle, you've talked about VACO before, and we do a lot with them.
When we stick to the agenda, I'm not sure, we're closing in on 10 o'clock.
Okay. So the last
I
thing
see
I
you,
just
Charlie.
wanted to
Hold on a
say is two things kind of around this. And I have to go back to a conversation that we had. And something that you said, Tim, earlier about kind of keeping the drumbeat going. And I think it's so cool to have people around you that challenge how you think about stuff. And so I think you know what I'm about to say. I asked Holly, what her thoughts were about how to kind of keep a continuous buzz about PlanRVA and what we do. And I thought that your answer was just really helpful, that might be a little bit too high of an expectation that our organization would be sort of a constant buzz. And in the way that media is communicated now and kind of what people are buzzing about all the time, we probably don't want to be among those things that generate the constant buzz, because they probably tend to be a bit more negative, right? And so I think we jokingly all came across this, and so I mean it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but this idea of maybe a perpetual murmur, I think is a really great thing. So to your point, about like, we want to be that kind of first call. And so how do we keep PlanRVA kind of parked, just sort of sitting back there in that part of our brain that's not maybe top of mind all the time, but when somebody needs something, it's like first on the sort of like retrieval list. And so I think we're really trying to think about that with our communication channels and media. As we've grown our capacity through what Sid has done and through what Gilbert has done, it's been really about like how to keep, the volume at the right amount, so it's not overloading, but it's also not so sparse that people kind of, we get lost in the algorithms. So I think we've gotten there. I think now we're really trying to, and Sid's done a great job of learning from different posts to be able to see from a time, all the things that everybody does when they get savvy at this stuff from a social media perspective, but really try to leverage our communication channels. So we did, I'll announce again, move our quarterly newsletter to monthly. And so Janice is orchestrating that, and so it's a great way to be able to, I think, put that in your hands every month. What did the boards do? So if nothing else, you had this cheat sheet to go back to your localities and report on that, but also to be able to gain hopefully a distribution list. It still is geared toward our commissioners, our local governments. I mean, but it can be useful to the general public as well if they subscribe. We have a blog that's gotten pretty active. We're committed to doing at least 2 posts, and sometimes we're having more content than we can even keep up with to be able to post to the blog, and we're experimenting with how to push that content across social media, the newsletter, and the blog, so that things don't just sit in one channel at a time. And then I think one of the things that Sid's done really well, and I don't know if you have the ability to pop that up, but we've been trying to make our YouTube channel more visually accessible, and I think you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. It doesn't take long for anybody that's affiliated with this organization to know that our relationships between other regional bodies is complicated. And so, PlanRVA sits kind of at the foundation of staffing a lot of different things. And so we've been working with the way that we push this information out and how we brand it, how we logo it, how we title it, to be able to become more consistent, but hopefully more navigable. So Sid's going to show you what he's been able to do.
Do you want me to share it since you've got the live stream? I can share the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so thanks. Sorry, I didn't think about
might
that.
be a little bit easier for him to see.
You want to start talking about what you've been
Sure.
doing?
So with the YouTube page, I mean, nice noticing it. We've just had a bunch of videos that every time we live stream, just having it on there, and looking at the analytics, at least in the last couple of years, the viewership and how many people are seeing our videos has been kind of low, and just trying to figure out, is it because of the content or is it just hard to find? And so I've heard a couple of things on, locating videos, finding certain committee videos, certain dates, and especially if it's scattered throughout. So over time, coming up with an idea of keeping, especially with our new branding that we went through and everything, kind of keeping that consistent on our YouTube page with color schemes and titles and logos and everything, to make sure everything is shown on there as to this committee meeting, this date, this location for all the videos. So if you go to our YouTube page, you just go to the home page part. Janice, if you click home real quick, I've customized our channel enough so that when you go to it, right as soon as you go to a home page, you'll see what the live video is going to be happening. So right now it's our public outreach committee. So anybody that goes, they'll see that first before they go down and see the playlist that I've created for PlanRVA, TPO, and the CBTA. And within that, there are playlist videos that I've added the same custom design to it, but each of them, if you go to just one of them, has a date next to it. So that way people are always aware when this meeting happened, and be able to go to it directly. So, and other comments I've gotten is, I don't want to see my face freezing mid-talk, or some other expression or something like that of all of our Zoom meetings and or just the boardroom. So always open to ideas, always open to seeing how we can improve this. But as for now, this is just a starting baseline on committee members and the constituents to be able to come and find our meetings very easily with all the information on there. So
You guys remember that we went to YouTube under your chairmanship when we had to all of a sudden flip to virtual meetings and, you know, we were like everybody trying to figure out all this virtual technology and everything like that. So I'm grateful for what you've done, so to kind of go back and it's been you know, we host a lot of meetings and everything's live streamed now. So to go back and get everything organized and sorted is really good. But I think that sort of uniformity of how things are organized and how things are titled and labeled, it does make it a lot easier for people to go back and find things. And I think that Sid's also become more tuned to be able to snip some things. And so we're going to be able to have those shorter video clips. And he's been, particularly with larger events, been able to, I guess it's timestamp. You know, so if you wanted to see this segment of the joint annual meeting, you can just click right there. And so we're working with that. I don't know that we're in a position from a staffing perspective right now to do that for every meeting that we host, but I think for the larger events, probably some of the more important, you know, annual decision-making processes and things like that that we think would be likely that someone would want to go back and search for, we can do those kinds of you know, kind of enhanced things. And it's just been really great how much you've dived into learning how to manipulate Zoom and YouTube to make it all fit together. So thank you.
Of course. And I think there's more to it. I think looking at the customization, there's more we could do to enhance our page to bring on new subscribers. So whether it's a featured video that new subscribers would see that would tailor to what we are as a committee or what the YouTube page is supposed to show and what you're going to get out of it, a trailer, multiple different things that, you know, future discussions can happen as we improve our media pages.
And I will challenge you on one thing. I'm actually surprised at how many people are tuning in and seeing the numbers of like watchers, either live or of archive videos. It's I mean, compared to when we were only in person and didn't have the live stream option, you know, it was visible, it was the 0 to 7 people in the room. And
Right.
we're in the double digits most of the time, which I'm like, wow. So,
And subscribers have been increasing, so
Yeah.
the more we make our page
yeah,
more
and
accessible
this,
to.
if nothing else, this has made it, I think, a lot easier for some of the staff in your local jurisdictions to follow what's going on. You know, because if they have to drive here, particularly from the outlying areas, it's their whole day. But if they can listen while they're, you know, doing other things, they can pay attention and know what's going on. And I think that also helps with the communication back with the jurisdictions.
Thank you for the update. Charlie, final comments or question? What, you had your hand up before?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to Martha. If she could get that information on Mike Chandler's new group or the UVA Planning Commissioners group, I'd greatly appreciate it. I've got several folks that could benefit from that. I can't find Mike Chandler and the old group on the internet anywhere. Thanks.
Okay, I'll look for Jonah's contact information.
Jacob, anything, clarification, comments, questions, final?
Just that I apologize. This is your first meeting, Holly, and it was this dense, but it's normally not this dense. Just for reference, but I think we covered a lot of important things. So good meeting, everyone. And Martha, I do wonder if we can have our bench consultants maybe work on some reports, but we on that offline that might be helpful in terms of like if jurisdictions in the region are trending towards not using their zoners as much and using long range planning, those kinds of things. Just like workforce trends and planning, that might be helpful.
I am not hearing everything you said, Jacob, so I'm gonna follow up with you to hear what you said and make sure we can.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Did you hear it?
Bobby, anything?
No, just glad to be a part of it, and it was a good meeting.
Yeah,
Thanks for being
coming.
here.
Yeah,
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for being here. Neil, anything, final comments?
No, good conversation.
It's a great conversation. Thank you all for putting the time in. Anything else from staff? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great meeting.